2 years ago, there was a coach, and we were selecting between a multitude of coaches for these things that we do through our foundation, these kids beginner series. And one coach in particular came an hour early. Okay, and I even told him, I said, you don't need to come an hour early. You really can come half an hour. That'll do plenty. And he goes, no, I want to be extra prepared and make sure we give the best experience possible. Little things like these stand out and separate you. Because why? It's not an average thing to do. Okay, the average person will come 10 minutes early to their job. A good person will come 30 minutes. An exceptional one will come about an hour and a half. It's like, but the whole point is like this: even though that wasn't maintained, just even doing it once and on the first day, like, it does separate you and makes you stand out. When you're in a large athletic department, I'm now talking about preparing you for NCAA, or when you go to Team Canada tryouts, let's say your NTC tryouts, some of you have been to that, or you go into a corporation, a large corporation that has 1,000 employees. How are you going to stand out if you never do things that stand out? So there's something to think about. How are you going to stand out if you never do things that stand out? So if you don't do things that stand out, then what are you doing? You're doing what's expected of you and what's common. And if you don't go above and beyond what they call, for example, in militaristic terms, going above the call of duty, what does that mean? It means you do more than is expected of you. And people that do more than is expected of them, they pleasantly surprise their superiors or the people that promote them or give them opportunities in the world. One of the things we're going to discuss later on in this series at some point is in depth is this idea that positive emotion is elicited when reality is better than the expectation. So when you have an expectation of something and then reality is better than the expectation, that's when people experience positive emotion. Well, you want the people who hold opportunities for you in life to experience positive emotion, don't you? Don't you? If you're working in a company or on a national team, wouldn't you want your bosses to experience positive emotion from you? How do you do that? You make their reality better than their expectation for you. When I expect everybody to come, let's say 5 minutes early, and you come 15 minutes early, that's a pleasant surprise for me. And I will notice that. Why? Because you made me experience a level of positive emotion. These are just things that you should know in trying to get to reaching your full potential in life. Okay, especially working in or thriving in a system. And unfortunately or fortunately, almost everybody at some point in their life has to thrive in a system before they can go and build their own, if that makes sense. Okay, so learning how to gain opportunities within a system, whether you like it or not, is a useful skill at times. Okay. We had a team goal last year. Okay, we achieved it. We had it 2 years ago. We achieved it. I talked about one of the team goals this year. We had 4, and one of them was specific to these mental performance classes, and the other one was timeliness. There were 2 others. Okay, but timeliness and better engagement in these mental performance classes. Last year, we had such a great turnout on all these classes. Almost everybody showed up and came out. But I think there's another gear to go. Can you not just show up? Can you show up and contribute to the conversation, knowing that the more you contribute to the conversation, the more you'll get out of it? And now that's a theme for you to understand in life. A lot of times, the more you contribute to something, paradoxically, you gain or get out of that. Okay? It almost comes organic. And so learning to be great contributors to the things that you endeavor through life. You don't just show up. You go above the call of duty, as we discussed. What does that look like in a session like this or a meeting like this? Does anybody know what going above the call of duty would look like in a meeting or session like this? Go ahead, Keon.
Participating and do like what you're being asked. Have a notebook. Be ready for every session mentally and with all the stuff that you need for the session.
Mm-hmm.
And fix problems before the session.
So, by my standards, I would think that would be the expectation. What does going above the call of duty look like? Go ahead, Sam.
Trying to really think deep on every single question or idea that's being presented, and like trying to express your opinions on everything that you can.
Yeah, and that takes courage for in some cases. So Sam's got that right. It's like thinking deeply about what we're discussing in here. Really philosophizing on what we're discussing in here, and then having the courage to express it in a room of X amount of people. You know, public speaking takes courage. In the US, they found it was one of the greatest fears of the population. Public speaking. It takes a lot of courage to publicly speak. There's a great entrepreneurial organization called Y Combinator. It's based in California, and there was a leader in that organization that made it's a very popular organization, by the way, in the startup world. And he said, you know, if you have courage, everything else falls into place. And so one of the most important things that you're looking for in an entrepreneur in that organization is the trait of courage. Okay, do they have courage? Okay, because if you have courage, everything else can fall into place, is what he was claiming, and it's very true. It's like here's why it's very true, guys. You can have the greatest potential, ideas, skill set, talent, but if you don't have the courage to express it in the world, then you don't maximize that all of that ability. Okay, so it does take courage to be great. I always say one of the things I told Sam in the first times of meeting her, I used to say, look, something to understand is that if you want to be the number one player in the country, you're the number one player in the country. There's only one number one player in the country. You have to be different. And being different will raise eyeballs. And being number one, everybody will look towards you. So what does that mean? It means you have to get really, really, really comfortable with everybody looking at you and being able to perform and execute your task with all of the country's eyeballs on you. You know, there's some of the most impactful roles and jobs in this world require that level of courage and boldness. For example, you can't be the prime minister or president of a country without your whole country watching you speak. So if you don't know how to speak, or if you don't have the courage to speak publicly, that's one of the jobs you can cross off that you'd ever be able to do. What we're going to try to do through this series is eliminate that. We're going to try to make sure that you have to cross off the least out of anybody in the country. And you're the most qualified for whatever position you want in life, whether that's to be a pro athlete, a surgeon, a doctor, a lawyer, a prime minister, or president, in Ransom's case, as an American. Okay. Do you understand? Okay. It's like, how can we complete you? Going into a little bit more specifics here with Federer would say this about tennis. I think he said this around like 12 years ago or so. He said, a great tennis player should be able to hit any shot from anywhere on the court. But that's such a metaphor for a great individual. What does that mean? It means a great tennis player should be able to be put into any situation on the court and be able to produce the result. Okay, that's a great tennis player. That's a competent tennis player. So how can we apply that into who you are as a person. A great person should be placed in any position and be able to problem solve how to get out. So in other words, they should be extremely qualified and competent. And of course, we're not perfect. We don't know how to do everything, but we can strive for that. We can strive to learn more about how to do more things. And one of the things that you'll learn through this mental performance series is that skill sets are very transferable. And I don't say that from an opinion. I say that from what the research shows. You know, I learned this, I was trained in psychology of performance, and they constantly gave analyses of the skill sets and traits that you wouldn't think were transferable, but almost all of them were, weirdly. And what does that mean? It means what you do in the tennis world, for example, will translate into the real world. What you do in the real world will translate into the tennis world. For many of you, you had to do a team run at some point today. And on that team run, you were instructed to not run across the lines, to be very detailed and not run over the lines. Why in the military do they teach you to make your bed? What does that have to do with anything they're going to have to do in the applicable world? Can anybody take a guess as to why it's important to learn to make your bed perfectly before you get approved to move on to your next set of the day, or next set of tasks for the day? Go ahead, Ransom.
Because it shows the importance of being super detailed and careful about the things that you do, whether if it's a random task like making your bed, and it shows that you'll be able to be really detailed in the other higher level tasks that they give you.
Okay, so making your bed every morning shows and really trains two traits. Those two traits are reliability, so consistency. Can you do the same task every single morning? And the other trait is detail. Can you make that bed perfectly? No creases. So training reliability and detail. It's utilized so intensely. People know it famously for militaristic reasons. Militaristic reasons. That's life or death situations. This is the most serious of serious trainees in the world. And you know why it's still so prominent today? University of Toronto came out with a study. I can send you, I think it was actually put into the link, or no, you'll receive it at some point. But University of Toronto came out with a research study years ago, and it found that the greatest predictor of future success in an individual was two traits. Well, one main trait: conscientiousness. So after general IQ or talent, the most important trait University of Toronto found was conscientiousness. Very interestingly, conscientiousness is comprised of two sub-traits: reliability and detail. Very interesting. So if there's two traits you can embody the most if you wanted to guarantee your future success, as per University of Toronto's research study, it would be to become a detailed and reliable person, meaning you show up every day reliably, and then you be detailed, meaning you don't make the simple mistakes. There were times today for example, at today's practice where people were making simple mistakes. For example, forgetting the light jog. And that's a simple mistake in terms of your physicality, but another simple mistake is getting a sitter right on top of the net, being a little bit absent-minded, going for too small of a target and missing. These are things we shouldn't mess up. Okay, but it takes a detailed individual to not mess these things up. General Patton is famous for saying this quote. It's that, "How can I trust you to do the big things in life if you can't do the little things right?" Meaning, if you can't make your bed or get your uniform right, how can I send you into battle? If you can't do the little things right, how can you be trusted to do the big things right? And you have to see the importance in the little things, guys. Why do you have to see it? Because your life is made up of little daily actions that you do every day. Okay? Your tennis career will be made up of small daily objectives that will set you up for the big tournament or the big match. You know, people don't just win Wimbledon. They put in thousands of days doing the boring and the mundane and what would appear to be unimportant work to show up one day and be ready for the big win, which would be Wimbledon in the case of tennis. So you have to really learn to be somebody who embraces doing the little things right. Okay? Caring about the details in your life. Okay. At this point, I'm going to ask if anybody has any thoughts as to what we've been discussing, as we've gone over a lot here already. Okay. Go ahead, Owen.
Just to recap, I think that one of the most important things, if I were to take anything away from this meeting, would be to always be detailed and to be very specific about what you do and how you do it, especially the second part, how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you, for your example, making your bed, being able to make it without any creases, I think is way more important than just making the bed.
Look, imagine if I said to you guys, every single morning for the next 6 months, you could not move on to your day until I inspect how you made your bed. And two things have to happen. You need to make your bed every morning, and you have to make it perfectly. After 6 months, you would organically, almost accidentally, become a very consistent and detailed person. That's what we're trying to do through these sessions. Not the mental performance sessions, but your daily life. Every session you come here to Mission Elite, we want you to do it perfect effort and be detailed about your effort and your attitude, so that in 6 months, you accidentally became a different person. That you leave here and you say, oh my God, I'm way more detailed and I'm way more consistent than when I came in. So every day you come here, we're going to be on you to do things right, so that you can develop that trait inside of you. These are trainable skills. One of the reasons why you don't emphasize natural IQ in the University of Toronto study is because it's actually not that trainable. Why you emphasize the conscientious trait, the one after the natural IQ, is because that is a very trainable trait. But it starts with you wanting to train that, caring about how you present yourself every morning. You know, a couple years ago, I got really on one of our players for showing up to practice with creases in their shirt, like it was an unironed shirt. It's because how you present yourself shows a level of detail. You know, even how your camera is pointed in here. Are you centered in your camera? You want to become a detailed person. I'll tell you why. I think that the best players in the world, for example, I can relate this to tennis, are the most detailed. Like, they think about things within the tennis world, for example, that the average person just doesn't. They have an eye or a knack for little things. Little things matter to them that it doesn't matter to the average person. And that's, whether that's a cause or an effect, we don't know. But there is some reality in the fact that not the most talented players, but the players that maximize their potential have learned to become people that care about things that the average person don't, if that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to go over, this is also partially why it's so important to take notes throughout these series and sessions, is because There will be a lot thrown at you, okay? And if you can't process it all at once, you can come back later and review it and take piece by piece by piece. But that you have a general knowledge. Okay, I'm going to move on. What I'm really trying to do in today's series is prepare you for the ones ahead. So here's something important to think about and to note. Okay, you learn this. We talk a lot about player ownership. We talk about learning to be the leaders of your own careers and lives. Why is that so important? Well, because what you understand, okay, or what you come to understand is that most of your life, this is something you should think deeply about. Most of your life, it may be hard for you to understand right now while many of you still live with your parents, but most of your life you'll spend alone. Okay? Most of your life you will spend without people on top of you telling you how to live it and what to do. Okay? That's the truth. When you become an adult, for example, okay, you have to wake yourself up in the morning. You have to decide to show up to work with the best attitude and effort. From 0 to 18 or 17 really are the only periods of your life where people are going to tell you and be on top of you to do things right. And so the point is that if you don't learn to do that for yourself, if you don't learn how to self-police, self-coach, and have ownership of your own life, you will be so unbelievably unprepared for the majority of your life. You will be so left behind and not know what to do. Understanding that most of your life you will spend alone. Even when you're married, if you actually think about it, you go to the grocery store, you're driving, you go to work, a lot of your life will be spent alone by yourself. Okay? So look, you can even think about this in terms of your own tennis development right now. Let's say you train 20 hours a week, okay, under the supervision of a coach. Well, there's 24 hours in a day. There's 7 days in a week. You're only being coached 20 hours, let's say, of the entire week. 20 hours. So majority of your life is not being coached. Do you understand this? Majority of your life is not being coached. So if you're amazing when you're being coached in those 20 hours, you do everything right, but then you're not able to coach yourself outside of those 20 hours and you don't do outside of those 20 hours well, that's majority of your life. Then you'll wonder, why am I not making progress? Well, because majority of your life, you are not being elite-minded. You have to learn, more importantly, how to be elite in the darkness, in the shadows, when nobody's watching you. Because most of your life, nobody's watching you or telling you to do things right. You have to get really good at telling yourself and getting on top of yourself and doing things right. And that's why I like things like, that's why I think physical training is so important, because you're in your own head. When you go on long runs alone, for example, you're in your own head and nobody's got to tell you. You could stop. But you learn through long runs, for example, to self-police, to resist the ease, and to become a really good self-coach. If you want to be successful in life, post-junior career, you're going to have to learn to be a really good self-coach. You could just take myself, for example. I had a coach during my time as a junior in Indiana. Okay, but when I got to be about 19, 20 years old and I went on my own, since then I've had to coach myself. If I don't wake up tomorrow morning, if I miss an alarm, I missed an alarm. If I bring poor effort to my job tomorrow, I can get away with that. Of course, I'll face the consequences of that, but there's not going to be anybody telling me to give good effort tomorrow. So again, I'm really more interested in who you are when nobody's telling you what to do than who you are when somebody's telling you to do. And I think that's something you should become very interested in. Who are you when nobody's telling you to do something? do you do it at 100%? When it's just you watching. Because that's majority of your life. It'll just be you watching. Does this make sense? Okay, any thoughts on that? Go ahead, Sheldon.
I think what it takes to be like the best in the world is to really have ownership in your life, referring to what you said, and to have the elite mentality. And from what you were talking about self-coaching, and I think it really reminds me that I should take more ownership in my life and to be the best in the world.
Right. Look, it's funny. Even in team training, today, for those of you that were at practice, a certain amount of you said, at the end of practice, I said, were you the best in the country today? A certain amount of you said, yes, I did train like the best in the country today. And many of you said no. I was there coaching, and still many of you said no. Meaning, even when you're under the watch of a professor or a teacher or a coach, it's still up to you. And if you decide you don't want to be the best in the country in today's practice session in terms of effort and attitude and energy, you can make that decision. And if you make that decision enough times, does it not make sense that you will not over time be the best in the country? Now, if you make that decision enough times to be the best in the country in terms of effort and attitude in today's practice, it's not surprising if in 4 or 5 years you are. It's such a corny quote. I don't like to say it. I don't like to bring it up, but really, really, really. And you know, it's funny. At times during my playing career, I actually questioned its validity. But I have realized and am more in belief, stronger than ever and ever, especially over a longer period of time, that that effort and attitude and energy in the long run in the long run always beats talent and skill set. And I say this as somebody who at a point in my life questioned that. You know, there was a point in my career where I said, you know, the process is just sometimes unfair. You know, sometimes the people that do everything right still lose. And that is true. But it's only true for a period of time, is what I've realized. You know, this is when I was younger, and I didn't have enough time span to really get to see that, no, I was wrong. I really am starting to believe now, and more than ever, and each year passes more than ever, that that's not true. You can do everything right and still lose in a short period of time. But over a long period of time, if you do everything right, in the end, your chances of winning just increase and increase and increase and increase. Okay, so like I said, if you choose enough days to not be the best in the country, over time you will not be the best in the country. And if you choose enough days to be the best in the country in terms of effort, energy, and attitude, over time you will be. Okay? And we saw a meta example of this with Ryan, for example. You know, it took him 3 years to have his big breakthrough tournament, let's say at provincials, making the finals. Up until then, he didn't have any big results, but he did every day choose to be, you know, one of the best in the country. And then in the end, it paid off. Now, if he stopped playing after 2 years, he wouldn't have learned that that's going to happen. And so then he might go around thinking, oh, life isn't fair. You know, you can do everything right. But this is the key. You got to stay in the game long enough. If you stay in the game long enough, you will get to see that the efforts you put in do bear rewards. Go ahead, Ransom.
I was just thinking about how, like, you had said before the season started, how one of, like, the main factors of choosing the people for the fall program was coachability. And I was just thinking how if you can't be coachable, and you can't, train to be the best in the country while you have, coaches during practice, and you can't even coach yourself to be the best outside of practice when you don't have those peers around you.
Certainly. And how can you turn that around? Urgency. Okay, this is where these sessions become super important. If you don't take the time each week to reflect deeply and think about how you're living your life, where it's leading you towards, and what you're on path to end up as, you could go 5 years and never change your approach. You could go your whole life and never change your approach simply because you never had the time to stop and think. That's a truth. That's a fundamental truth. And you see that all the time in people in the workforce. They get into the workforce at 20 years old, let's say, and they never had a year or a time period long enough to stop and think, how do I want to direct or redirect the course of my life? And they just show up to work day in and day out, and they're unhappy. But they never have the time to stop, think, and redirect their course of life. And then what happens is one day they're 70 years old and they have all these unfulfilled dreams that had they stopped each week, a simple act of just stopping for an hour each week to think and reflect about how they want to go about life, they could have changed that path. And their life could be a completely different direction. And so it is so critical and important, because in many ways your career is almost like a practice court for your life. It really is like just a meta category of life. You should get into the habit of taking an hour at least each week. And if you can take more, and not just and get out of this habit of just showing up every day to your life, for that matter, but actually stopping and thinking about how you want to approach your life and what are the decisions you want to make in life. Okay, it's why, like, for example, Bill Gates, he founded Microsoft, one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world, in history of the world, maybe perhaps. He has what's called Think Weeks, okay? And in these Think Weeks, he literally takes about a week or two, I think, and he goes to a kind of isolated cabin. And he just basically philosophizes, reads, and reflects. It's a way for him to get out of the busyness of his day-to-day operations and think, how do I want to redirect my life? You know, people that don't take their own versions of Think Weeks, it's very easy to get caught into just daily operations every single day for life and never having the time to think, is this what I want to do? Is this how I want to do it? Should I take a risk? Should I keep doing what I'm doing? You get what I mean? This is why it's just an hour each week is so important. You know, we're stopping and thinking. If I continue to act the way I'm acting every day currently, will I end up in a place that I want to be? If the answer is yes, keep on. You can go about your daily operations. If the answer is no, then you have to stop and think, what do I need to change in order to get to where I want to be? You know, it's a real example showcased through what's called self-authoring programs. Now, self-authoring programs are actually recognized as a form of therapy. And really what self-authoring programs are is you take a period of time and you write about your past, your present, and your future, and you write about your strengths and your weaknesses. Now, these self-authoring programs were handed out through a minority college years ago, and the results of the members within the college that did the self-authoring programs, at the end of doing the self-authoring programs, there was a 50% reduction rate, dropout rate. there was like 2 or 3 times more productivity, effectiveness, and performance of results in the students just after doing these self-authoring programs. What is the self-authoring program really at its core? It just makes you stop and reflect, thinking about the course you want to take moving forward in life, the lessons you learned from the past. So you could get this from what I'm saying. If you become somebody who actually takes the time each week to think about the lessons of the past, think about where they are in the present, and think about where they want to go in the future, your life will change drastically over time for the better. Okay? It's the difference between somebody walking through life blindly and somebody walking through life with their eyes wide open. Clear? Okay. Any thoughts? Okay, go ahead, Ransom.
This is just like a thought about like what I like to do. But whenever I'm like at the gym and I'm working out, a lot of times that's when I like to think about like what I'm doing with my life and any like goals that I have and how I'm going to achieve them, because the gym, I feel like it's a super good place because you are actively making yourself better physically, so you're already sort of in the mindset that you can go further with any goals that you have. But then it's also nice because you're not having to like multitask because you're just sitting there working out or whatever. So that's like a good time that I like to reflect.
Definitely. Great point. Okay. I'm going to end today's series, and I want to explain this point as I end it. Okay. Sorry, let me just think how to best formulate this for you. The fundamental idea is this. If you tell me what you want out of life today, if you were to tell me that, that would be a great first step in self-awareness. But here's the issue. Let's say you have a desire today. The thing you have to understand is often your desire today was to be sought out after 5 years ago. And I'm going to give you an example. I had a player come up to me recently and tell me they really wanted to make an extra push in their career, for example. The issue with that is that sometimes deciding today, because you know you want to today, is too late. You know what I mean by that? Okay, let me break this down for you here. And let me try to simplify this. So it is a complicated notion. You kind of have to think about what you want in 5 years from now. You have to kind of be an anticipator, be a forward thinker. Take the time and think. What will I care about in 5 years? What am I going to want out of my life in 5 years? In 5 years, what am I going to want out of my life? Why do you have to think about that today? Well, because whatever you want today, in order to have attained it, you had to have figured out that's what you wanted 5 years ago. Because it takes 5 years to build the life or take the approach in order to get what you'll want today. So for example, let's take this for example. Imagine you're 10 years old, okay? And you just go about your life when you're 10 years old and you don't think other than day by day by day. You just go about your life as life takes you. And then when you're 15 years old, you all of a sudden start thinking about university. And you're like, I really want to become a great tennis player, let's say. Okay, a great tennis player. I'm going to start training like an animal to get there. Okay? And let's say, you want to, the goal is to become a 10 UTR. Okay? Issue is now you're 15, you're going to be recruited in 2 years. You only have 2 years to do that. And you can do it. Lots of people have done it before. That's not the point. The point is you would have been so much better off if you realized 5 years ago what you would care about 5 years from now. That's the point. And this is a mistake that a lot of people, including myself in some forms, has made. When I was 12 years old, I was thinking about what I wanted now. I wanted to win now. And I didn't think, what would I care about when I'm 17? For example, when I'm 17, I'm going to need to be this. I'm going to need to be that. I'm going to need to be this. Okay? Well, in order to get to that and get those attributes, I need to recognize it 5 years earlier and have the 5 years to build so that when I am that age, I can get what I want. Am I making myself clear, or is this complicated? I think it's a bit complicated. I'll keep trying to explain. Okay, here's a good example. High schoolers. I'm sure you can think about this in terms of your own peers or colleagues. In high school, what a lot of high schoolers care about now, not you guys, but a lot of people. In high school, they care about being cool. Okay? Let's say. They care about being the funny person in class, or, dressing a certain way, or, being rebellious. I don't know. I'm just giving an example. What do high schoolers care about now? Okay. And the issue is that if what you care about now is not going to be what you care about in 5 years, like that, those high schoolers at 17 years old, when they're 22 and they're going into they're done university, they're going into the workforce, are going to care about completely different things. They're 22 years old. What would somebody at 22 years old care about? Anybody? Go ahead, Chris.
For one thing, being financially stable.
Sure. Okay. That's a good example. You don't get there by when you're 17 years old, thinking about, oh, should I go get a perm this weekend or something? Or should I, how do I be the funny kid in class, right? If at 22 years old you're going to care about financial stability, what would you want to do? You'd want to prepare yourself for financial options, let's say. So a good job, a good career, maybe they started a business early, right? But you can't show up at 22, want something, and expect it to be there, is what I'm trying to get at. The best approach is to think about what you're going to want at 22 at 17. And then sacrifice what a 17-year-old would want for what your 22-year-old self would want. Does that make sense? See, that player that came up to me, they didn't realize that at 15 or 15 years old, or however old they were, they would really want to go hard on their tennis and prepare themselves for recruiting opportunities. And so from 10 to 15, they were not preparing for that. And then when 15 came and the desire came, they needed another 5 years to get to where they needed to be. Does this make sense? And although that is a sad situation, it's great that it happens so young, because some people don't learn this lesson, first off, ever. And secondly, some people learn it years down the line. Oh, I need to start thinking 5 years in advance, because then I could actually attain what I want in 5 years. So, for example, Keon, let's use you for example. How old are you?
13.
Okay. What do you think you're going to want when you're 18?
To be the best tennis player.
Okay. You want to be, let's say you want to win a Grand Slam. Okay, agreed? Okay, so are you going to, the thing we have to make sure of is that you don't just turn 18 and then decide, okay, I'm going to start training like a Grand Slam player. You actually would have to start training and living and breathing like a Grand Slam player at 13 to give yourself a shot at 18. Does this make sense, everybody? So What you want now may not be attainable, but you could get what you want in 5 years, guys and girls. If you start doing what it takes to get that now, being forward thinking and thinking about what am I going to want in 5 years? I've said to many of you guys this before. If you want to win a national championship, you've got to act like a national champion before you win the national championship. So what does that mean? What are the characteristics and the traits of a national champion? I can tell you. I won one. I can tell you. So much resilience. They have to be able to go down 5-0 and come back. Very likely, in order to, on your pathway to winning a national championship, in one of the rounds, you will be down in the scoreline. Another trait of a national champion. It's a long tournament. 128 draw. Maybe now it's 64. I don't know. But that's a lot of matches. So you're going to have to be so fit. You can't be a 12 UTR that got tired in the semifinals and now you're playing like a 9 UTR and expect to win. So super fit. Got to be bold and confident. Got to be, as you're rising, going round after round after round, all eyes are going to be on you. People are going to be talking about you. Are you comfortable with that? So you got to practice being bold and comfortable, having eyes on you. You got to train like a national champion. Full effort, attitude, training in an outstanding way. You cannot fit into the group. You have to be so much better in your effort, energy, and attitude than everybody else in the country. But the key thing is when I say if you want to win a national championship, you got to be a national champion before you win the national championship. What I'm trying to say is 5 years before you win your national championship, you got to be doing everything that a national champion would do. And then what will happen is when people look at you, they're going to believe that you're going to win a national championship because you're already showing all the signs that you could. Okay, any final thoughts? Okay, I will, go ahead, Owen.
I think that with your point about starting towards your goals right now instead of later on, all comes down to how much time you give yourself. And I think that if you decide that you're going to start working towards your goal too late, so like maybe you say, I'm going to start working towards it tomorrow.
Yes.
Well, every day you're just going to say, I'm going to work towards it tomorrow and then tomorrow. Why would you not start today? Because the best thing you could do is just start today.
Right.
And get working towards it.
Right. Mila?
The part where you were saying like sacrifice what like a 10-year-old would want for like something that your 15-year-old would want, like that may be like maybe you have practice and you have to miss your friend's birthday party. You sacrifice that, like, or yeah, miss a tournament or you sacrifice like missing a birthday party for like a tournament or something because like it's important and
Sure.
You know that, and it would be like important like if you missed it, like, you know.
Sure. Tristan?
I feel like a big part of the lesson you're talking about has been like discipline, because to be reliable you have to be disciplined, to be detailed you have to be disciplined, to self-coach you also have to you have to be disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
You have to discipline yourself to like, be the best.
Right. Oliver?
Yeah, now I should think more about what I want 5 years from now, and not what I want right now. And I want to win 5 years from now, but not now.
Yeah, and I'll say one thing quickly to that point. what you practice, you get better at. We know that as a fundamental truth. Even if you're not aware you're practicing something, you are practicing something. You could be practicing bad habits and you may not know it. And you're going to get better at that. That's what you're going to get better at. So you're not practicing nothing every day of your life. You're practicing something. You may be practicing sleeping in late or going to sleep late. And you may not be aware of the consequences, but you are practicing it. And you're getting better at it, for example. And so the reason why you need to really think about how you're living your life is because if you don't, you're still getting better at something. You just might be getting better at something that's not beneficial or helpful for you. Does this make sense? And the younger you are, the easier and more malleable your brain is. So the easier it is to change habits. So if you act a certain way for the next 5 years and decide at the 5-year mark, I want to change it, it's going to be harder to change than if you decided to change it when you were 10, let's say. So this is where we have to be people that think 5 years in advance. What are we going to care about in 5 years so we can start to make the positive changes today? Clear? Sam?
I was thinking about the goals that I have today, and I was just thinking if I recognized those goals 5 years ago, and if I started working towards them 5 years ago, I would be much closer to achieving them than I am right now.
Right.
Because I would just have so much more time towards, like just working towards the goals and, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the point, guys. Okay, maybe we made that mistake in the past, but we're not going to make the same mistake twice. If we made the mistake of not thinking 5 years in advance in the past, let's stop right now while we're young, learn that lesson, and not make it for the next 5 years, if that makes sense. Okay, at what point do you fix the mistakes of your past? And the sooner you do, the better off you'll be. Keon?
Going back to the 5 years point, I feel like if you were to choose what you want to be 5 years before, you would have a much clearer path to where you want to go.
Right.
Because if you don't, you'll be like rushed and you won't have any time. As you said, if you're 15 and then you get recruited in 2 years, you only have that small amount of time to get good and achieve your goals. But if you have like more time, it's more clear and you can work towards it better.
Yeah. I'll say one thing really quickly. I want to be conscious of your guys' time. There was a player. He got to around the recruiting age. And when he was really young, he used to lose points and have a negative reaction, when he was really young. And he did it so much without realizing how severe the consequences were. I remember when he was about 18 or 19, he wanted to stop the negative reactions after losing points. And I kid you not, it appeared as if he literally couldn't. And it was such a difficult and daunting task, he actually gave up on it. Literally, he got to the point where he practiced it so much, he would lose a point and could not react. It's the craziest thing. I'd never seen it in my whole life, of all the players I've seen, to the severity of what he dealt with. He literally couldn't stop negatively reacting. And where was that base built? It was built 5 years ago when he didn't realize what he was going to care about in 5 years, and he didn't realize the severity of his actions. Go ahead, Hudson.
I was just thinking about when we're talking about goal setting for the future and stuff, I just feel like it's really important to understand the law of accumulation, understanding that every single thing that we do will count and help us later on for our future.
Certainly. Chris?